I love that version, Shemaine. So amazing. So amazing. And it ties nicely into what I want to speak to today. As you know, we have spent this month in blasphemy, and I want to continue that journey. No, I'm kidding. But there are many different ways to interpret these wonderful stories. I've shared from time to time my own journey of growing up in a very traditional Christian church with a mindset. And it was good. I always loved Jesus, and I still do. However, my understanding has evolved and grown. So I always need to get my disclaimers out of the way. Not here to step on anybody's theological toes, make anybody wrong. I just am sharing my own journey. For me as a young person, I loved this compassionate, loving presence that I always felt with the words of Jesus. And yet I also struggled with an understanding of how is it that so many religions are teaching we're the chosen, that we can, you look around our world today and these major fights that are taking place are about religion. For a God that says, thou shalt love one another. So something got mixed up in the translation of that. I'm not sure what it is. But my own journey has been to understand this powerful message that I felt even as a child and to embrace it and to bring forth something. So as I studied the Bible as a young person, I'm grateful for that experience. It taught me many things. But it also created some confusion for me. Because even as I was learning the Bible, I was also learning that it was literally true. And that was confusing. I often like to share that about the time we were studying Jonah, remember Jonah? Spent some time in the whale, actually the big fish, but who's going to get caught in details? I was also studying in school anatomy. Remember when you get to do the frog thing? And you learn about digestive systems and all that sort of thing. And so the religious part of me was saying, okay, here's a story. The scientific part of me was saying, okay, here's something else. So how is this so? So it wasn't until later, after my brief 20-year vacation from church, that I came into an understanding and awareness of a metaphysical approach to understanding these wonderful Bible stories. And what I began to understand and what I began to appreciate was the story is the thing. I often like to say that something doesn't have to be factually true in order to be true. You see, when we begin to understand the mythological, the story behind this, then we just realize that these are illustrations. These were stories. So many of these stories that were written in the Bible were stories that came from around campfires of people talking about their history and where they came from and how they evolved. And so this wonderful spiritual truth that is held in our Bible is powerful and became even more alive and more powerful for me as I began to embrace a larger way of viewing it. So somewhere along the line, as I came into this teaching and began to read about Jesus in a different context, as we talked about seeing Jesus as the great example and not the great exception. That when he was saying, he meant literally, greater works than these you shall also do. It's to say that when we can understand the consciousness in which the masters live, and we begin to understand the principles through which they apply, we too can be vessels and vehicles of greater light in the world. So Dr. Holmes said to us that we must understand that the Christ is not a person, but rather it is a principle. Jesus, the man, became the living embodiment of the principle of the Christ. The Christ being that oneness with the divine. And so inherent within each one of us is that recognition that we are connected to a larger life, to a larger story, to a larger something. But we forget. We go unconscious. It's like we get to earth and go, forgot everything I knew. So let's just start all over again, right? And so these powerful stories that we are holding through the masters, through the ages, they're all trying to say something to us. And they're trying to say there's a larger life. There's a bigger picture. There's a larger story unfolding. But we don't see it because we are limited in our perception. But the expanded beings are saying there is a larger life and it is present and available for us right now. You see, we tend to believe our own eyes. Notice that? We think that what we perceive reality to be is reality. Big mistake. I was thinking about, as I was reading, I was thinking about Galileo. Now, up until Galileo, the obvious wisdom was that the sun circles the earth, the moon circles the earth, and all the stars circle the earth because the earth is the center. It's not hard to figure out. Just go out and look and you'll see it is true. Very obvious. But then along comes Galileo and he says, I've been researching this and doing some scientific study and rethinking this whole premise. And I'm going to suggest that we're all revolving around the sun. And so, of course, that news was welcomed with great joy and triumph. And parades were held and confetti was thrown. And it was like, aha, new insight has been born. Or he got excommunicated, whichever version of right? Because old paradigms often don't want to let go. This is true universally, it's true personally. If you've ever been in that process of letting go of a paradigm, you know. You'd just rather hang on to what is known, even if it's not working. So the masters, the brilliant spiritual masters, are coming to us and saying, wake up, become aware. There's a larger reality. For those that have eyes to see, let you see. And those that have ears to hear, hear. In other words, step into an expanded state of consciousness. And so those great masters, who I consider Jesus to be one of, are helping us to awaken to a greater possibility. So I found in my journey of going from this nice little Southern Baptist kid to being this radical blasphemist every Sunday, that it's about awakening to the larger story. For me, what I found is great joy in being able then to relate to this great person who became the Christ as the potential for each one of us when we awaken to our true identity and who we are. So now, there was a period of time that I couldn't do Christmas Eve services, especially in traditional churches. When they do that whole creed and all that sort of thing. But look at me, I'm all healed now. You can bring it. Because we're all saying the same thing. We're maybe meaning different things, but when you understand that there's some universal stories that are being told, and that the stories hold truth even if they're not factually accurate, then we can open our hearts to a greater understanding. So I was reading a wonderful book, rereading a wonderful book. If you've not read it, I highly recommend it. It's called Meeting Jesus Again for the First Time by Marcus Borg. And he too sort of has a similar journey to mine, or I have a similar journey to his, in kind of going from traditional to questioning to reinterpreting and re-understanding and then putting it in a larger framework. And so what he says is, for us to really understand the story of Jesus, we have to understand the whole story of the Bible, which is news, right? Because there's a continuum of thought that happens. But in the Bible, he says there's three macro stories, three larger stories that we should understand. The first story is the story of Exodus. We were in bondage, and then we found our way out and moved into the promised land. So we had to move from bondage into liberation. Now, these are lovely stories. In fact, there's a movie out. I haven't seen it, but I'm sure it's got big Hollywood budget and it's fabulous. So, that's all good. But perhaps there's a metaphor. Because I find that the Pharaoh in my life that keeps me in bondage is not a person. It is a belief system that I have incorporated. And what I love about our teaching is it says to us, your life is a direct reflection of what you believe it to be. And when we are in bondage to our old patterns, our old ways of being, our limited self, then the outer reflection is simply an outpicturing of that. But as we can move into the promised land, as we can go through that journey of the Exodus, of spending 40 years, or symbolically a period of time of completion, to move into a new state of awareness, we find ourselves in a period, in a way of living, of liberty, of liberation. So that's the first macro story, symbolic. The second macro story is the period of captivity. Because you remember, after all of this wonderful thing happened, they created their own world and they built a beautiful temple, lovely temple. And then the Babylonians, darn them, came in and burned it down and took them all into captivity. And so there's a period of captivity. A shift happened, though, out of that, where no longer was the temple the center of worship, but rather the word became the center of understanding. So that the traditions could be passed on, that the community became no longer dependent upon location, but about being together in sacred understanding of the word of the divine. And so ultimately there's a period of homecoming. And so you see this theme that flows through the Bible in story after story of stories of captivity and of homecoming. Famously, the prodigal son who goes off to live a life of riotous living, thinks he knows everything, as we all do, until we figure out how little we know, finds himself in humble circumstances, and eventually returns home. It's a coming home story. And so what do we find in this story is that the divine rushes to meet him and celebrates his awakening. The story of awakening, the story of homecoming is powerful. And we're always looking at coming home. So often what I hear people say when they find the center is, I feel like I came home. You see, there's a spiritual home that we all hold. There's a place that we know our oneness, our connection. And when we feel that, and when we sense that, we realize that we are indeed connected to something larger, a bigger story. The third story is the priestly story. And it is this wonderful story about sin and about purification and about forgiveness and about redemption. And this story plays out over and over and over. In the Old Testament, they had sacrificial acts of joining together with the one. The New Testament reflects that sacrificial lamb in a new light and a new understanding, but it's the same universal story. We need to understand all of these stories. Again, in case you're freaking out, sin is nothing more than error. So in truth, we are all sinners, right? Because we all make mistakes. The truth is we can learn and grow, and we are not bound by our mistakes unless we allow ourselves to be. So this process of forgiveness, of purification, of going and not making the same mistakes again, is where we find our freedom. In the larger context, you read all of this book as the study and the story of consciousness, of these players, of people who are very much like you and I, in all of their humanness, are finding ways to be in deeper relationship with the divine. Because all of the stories are stories of the journey. Now, I grew up believing it was all about destination. And in our version, there was only 2 destinations. Right? I was pretty sure the direction I was going. My Catholic friends, at least they got a third option. That would seem nice, You can hang out for a while while it's decided, but, nonetheless. But I'm going to suggest to you that this is a story and a journey of transformation, a journey of awakening to our divine self. This is why I love the image of seeing Jesus as the great example. Now, I love the imagery and the beauty and these of a child being born in very humble circumstances, of one who was different from us. But I believe that's all good and wonderful. But I think when we really understand that Jesus meant it when he said, greater works than these you shall also do. When he spoke to us and said, the kingdom of heaven is not here or there, the kingdom of heaven is within us. When he spoke to us of our greater potential and our greater possibility, this is the story and the message that I wanted to learn. How do I allow that Christ presence to be born in me? And I found that through the stories of liberation, of liberating myself from captivity, the captivity of my old mindset, of my old way of being, of the story of homecoming, coming home to the divine, finding that I live and move and have my being in that divine presence, of learning that I can grow and become more, that I can transform this journey, that I can be a loving presence in the world. To me, that's the powerful story. And so while I celebrate and honor all of it, I love the whole package of Christmas, all the stories. I love that we get to celebrate the birth of Jesus, that we get to have a little pagan ritual thrown in there. In case you're wondering, the Christmas tree, you won't find that in the Bible if you ever go back and look. You will not find it. That came later. Santa wasn't there, right? There's some things we added along the way just to enrich the story. But the story of a divine child, of God moving through humanity, awakening us to our greater self, transcending the world and the worldliness, of bringing forth greater compassion. Be ye therefore compassionate, even as the divine is compassionate. You see this message over and over and over when you read behind the stories. There is a story that says, awaken. Become aware of who you truly are. Allow that presence to be born in you and go forth and shine that light. Jesus famously said, don't hide your light. Don't hide your light under a bushel. Let your light shine brightly. We all have that divine light within us. But sometimes we've covered it with the bushel of wrong thinking, of misperception. So all of these stories need to be understood as stories of the journey, and they all need to be understood as stories of transformation as we develop our relationship with the divine. I'm always fascinated that the great spiritual masters say to us, the divine is a real present experience that you can have. And then we take that wisdom and we build these crazy structures around it that say you have to do all these other things to find the divine. Not sure what that's about. Maybe it's just too easy, right? Look within. Why would I do that, right? So the Christmas story for us is about celebrating. Yes, it's about celebrating the birth of Jesus, but it's also about celebrating the Christ that is resident within us. That this is a universal story that we're celebrating. And it is the story that is helping us, I think, to transcend where we are today. The message is as needed today as it ever was, maybe more so. So one of the things that I found fascinating was this idea that Marcus Borg puts forth where he says, understand what it means to believe in Jesus. He said, at the time, the word from the Greek believing is not adhering to doctrine. It's about giving your heart to something. And I love that. Do we give our heart to the divine? Albert Schweitzer famously said, I don't want to have the religion about Jesus, I want the religion of Jesus. And so too, for me, that is what I seek. I want to have a greater awareness and understanding that is not dismayed by the things of the world, but stands in the righteousness of divine love, in the power of divine law. This is the choice that I make, and this is what I allow to be awakened in me as we move through this season. Marcus Borg finishes this wonderful book by saying this: believing in Jesus in the sense of giving one's heart to Jesus is the movement from second-hand religion, in other words, the religion about, to first-hand religion, the religion of. From having heard about Jesus with the hearing of the ear to being in relationship with the Spirit of the Christ. For ultimately, Jesus is not simply a figure of the past, but a figure of the present. Meeting that Jesus, the living Jesus who comes to us even now, will be like meeting Jesus again for the first time. Wherever you are on the spectrum of understanding, I invite you to open your heart. To open your heart to this divine presence that is seeking to make itself known. To this divine light that is within each one of us as we awaken to it and allow it to be expressed. We can be healed. We can be blessed, and we can be a blessing to others. So let this season of light awaken within you that which you already know. Let us pray. As we breathe into this moment, into this awareness, into that knowing that closer than hands and feet, nearer than our breath, is the divine presence. That indeed there is but one life, one power, one presence, one being. And it is in this presence that we find our life. We did not create our life, life created us, but we are one with this infinite divine life. And therefore in this moment we allow ourselves to have that larger experience, to embrace the larger story. We open our hearts to the presence of divine love. We open our minds to the presence of divine wisdom. And indeed, we open the very portal of our soul to recognize our oneness in that relationship with the divine. We allow it to grow. We allow it to deepen. We allow it to be expanded. And from this expanded point of view, we know the truth. We know the truth, and the truth is what sets us free. For we know our oneness with wholeness. And knowing that that wholeness is revealing itself, expressing itself as health, as well-being, as vitality. This is our divine inheritance. We know the truth as absolute unconditional love. That this presence loves us right where we are, just as we are, awaiting our recognition of it. And as we move into that presence of unconditional love, we find it easy to forgive ourselves and to forgive those who we perceived as harmed us. We allow ourselves to experience an expanded state of being where love is the only reality and oneness is the only existence. As we continue our journey of exploration and expansion, we know that we are abundant beings right here and right now, for we are one with the very source, the very substance of all that is. We are reminded that as we seek this spiritual dimension, then all the other things are added to us. Everything else that is necessary for the fulfillment of our life is brought into full expression. And so we choose to seek first this spiritual dimension. We choose to make spiritual growth the priority. We choose to recognize the divine light in ourselves and in all those we meet. And we choose to bring that light joyously into the world. So we know we are blessed right here, right now. We give thanks for the many blessings, both those seen and those yet to be realized. And as we are blessed, it's only natural to extend the blessing. So we bless this spiritual community. We are grateful. We know that it is a divine light making itself known in the world to be a healing presence. We extend our blessing to our brothers and sisters around the world. I am holding that high vision for a world at peace, when our old ways of being are passed away and a new expanded state that recognizes goodwill for all, that allows peace on earth. When that becomes the order of the day, and I know we're only one collective thought away from that experience. So we bless our brothers and sisters. We hold the high watch for a planet at peace. And as always, we bless all priests, all rabbis, all ministers, all teachers of every faith. For we know there are many pathways to the divine, and therefore we honor and celebrate them all. In joy and in gratitude, then, I'm simply giving thanks. I'm giving thanks for this inner realization. I'm giving thanks for its perfect demonstration. I'm giving thanks for a law of mind, bringing forth the highest good for all. And so in joy and gratitude, I simply allow it to be so, as together we say, and so it is. I am so blessed, I am so blessed.